Hello, friends. We are back. And now we continue with the Three Musketeers, Chapter 23, The Rendezvous. D'Artagnan ran home immediately, and although it was 3 o'clock in the morning, he had some of the worst quarters of Paris to traverse. He met with no misadventure. Everyone knows that drunkards and lovers have a protecting deity. He found the door of his passage open, sprang up the stairs, and knocked softly, in a manner agreed upon between him and his lackey, Planchet, whom he had sent home 2 hours before the Hotel de Ville, telling him to sit up for him, opened the door for him. "Has anyone brought a letter for me?" asked D'Artagnan eagerly. "No, no one has brought a letter, monsieur," replied Planchet. "But one has come of itself." "What do you mean, blockhead?" "I mean to say that when I came in, although I had a key of the apartment in my pocket, and that key had never quit me, I found a letter on the green table cover in your bedroom." "And where is it?" "This letter you speak of." "I left it where I found it, monsieur. It is not natural for letters to enter people's houses in this manner. If the windows had been open even ajar, I would think nothing of it. But no, all was hermetically sealed. Beware, monsieur. There is certainly some magic underneath." Meanwhile, the young man had darted into his chamber and opened the letter. It was from Madame Boncheneux, and was expressed in these terms: "There are many thanks to be offered to you, and to be transmitted to you. Be this evening about 10 o'clock at St. Cloud, in front of the pavilion which stands at the corner of the house of Monsieur d'Estrées." While reading this letter, D'Artagnan felt his heart dilated and compressed by that delicious spasm which tortures and caresses the hearts of lovers. It was the first billet he had received. It was the first rendezvous that he had been granted. His heart swelled with the intoxication of joy, felt ready to dissolve away at the very gate of that terrestrial paradise called love. "Well, monsieur," said Planchet, who had observed his master grow red and pale successively, "did I not guess truly? It is not some bad affair?" "You are mistaken, Planchet," replied D'Artagnan, "and as a proof, there is a crown to drink my health." "I am much obliged, monsieur, for the crown he has given me, and I promise him to follow his instructions exactly. But it is not the less true that the letters which come in this way into shut-up houses—" "Fall from the heaven, my friend, fall from the heaven." "Then monsieur is satisfied?" asked Planchet. "My dear Planchet, I am the happiest of men." "And I may profit by monsieur's happiness and go to bed?" "Yes, go." "May the blessings of heaven fall upon monsieur, but it is not the less true that the letter—" And Planchet retired, shaking his head with an air of doubt, which the liberality of D'Artagnan had not entirely effaced. Left alone, D'Artagnan read and reread his billet. Then he kissed and rekissed 20 times the lines traced by the hand of his beautiful mistress. At length he went to bed, fell asleep, and had golden dreams. At 7 o'clock in the morning, he arose and called Planchet, who, at the second summons, opened the door, his countenance not quite freed from the anxiety of the preceding night. "Planchet," said D'Artagnan, "I am going out for the day, all day perhaps. You are, therefore, your own master till 7 o'clock in the evening. But at 7 o'clock you must hold yourself in readiness with 2 horses." "There," said Planchet, "we are going again, it appears, to have our hides pierced in all sorts of ways. You will take your musketoon and your pistols." "There now, didn't I say so?" cried Planchet. "I was sure of it. The letter, it is cursed." "Don't be afraid, you idiot. There is nothing in hand but a party of pleasure. Ah, like the charming journey the other day, when it rained bullets and produced a crop of steel traps. Well, if you are really afraid, Monsieur Planchet, resumed D'Artagnan, I will go without you. I prefer traveling alone to having a companion who entertains the least fear. Monsieur does me wrong, said Planchet. I thought you had seen me work. Yes, but I thought perhaps you had worn out all your courage the first time. Monsieur shall see that upon occasion I have some left. Only I beg Monsieur not to be too prodigal of it. He wishes it to last long. Do you believe you still have a certain amount of it to expend this evening? I hope so, Monsieur. Well, then, I count on you. At the appointed hour I shall be ready. Only believed that Monsieur had but one horse in the guard stables. Perhaps there is but one at this moment, but by this evening there will be 4. It appears that our journey is a remounting journey, then. Exactly so, said D'Artagnan, and nodding to Planchet, he went out. Monsieur Bonchenou was at his door. D'Artagnan's intention was to go out without speaking to the worthy mercer, but the latter made so polite and friendly a salutation that his tenant felt obliged not only to stop but to enter into conversation with him. Besides, how is it possible to avoid a little condescension toward a husband whose pretty wife has appointed a meeting with you that same evening at St. Cloud, opposite the Estres Pavilion? D'Artagnan approached him with the most admirable air he could assume. The conversation naturally fell upon the incarceration of the poor man. Monsieur Bonchenou, who was ignorant that D'Artagnan had overheard his conversation with the stranger of Meung, related to his young tenant the persecutions of that monster, Monsieur de la Famas, whom he had never ceased to designate during his account by the title of the Cardinal's executioner, and expatiated at great length upon the Bastille, the bolts, the wickets, the dungeons, the gratings, the instruments of torture. D'Artagnan listened to him with exemplary compliance, and when he had finished said, "And Madame Bonchenou, do you know who carried her off? For I do not forget that I owe to that unpleasant circumstance the good fortune of having made your acquaintance." "Ah," said Bonchenou, "they took good care not to tell me that, and my wife, on her part, has sworn to me by all that's sacred that she does not know. But you," continued Monsieur Bonchenou, in a tone of perfect good fellowship, "what has become of you all these days? I have not seen you nor your friends, and I don't think you could gather all that dust that I saw Planchet brush off your boots yesterday from the pavement of Paris. You are right, my dear Monsieur Bonchenou. My friends and I have been on a little journey. Far from here? Oh, Lord, no. About 40 leagues only. We went to take Monsieur Athos to the waters of Forges, where my friends still remain." "And you have returned, have you not?" replied Monsieur Bonchenou, giving his countenance a most sly air. "A handsome young fellow like you does not obtain long leaves of absence from his mistress, and we were impatiently waited for at Paris, were we not?" "My faith," said the young man, laughing, "I confess it, and so much more the readily, my dear Bonchenou, as I see there is no concealing anything from you. Yes, I was expected, and very impatiently, I acknowledge." A slight shade passed over the brow of Bonchenou, but so slight that D'Artagnan did not perceive it. "And we are going to be recompensated for our diligence," continued the mercer, with a trifling alteration in his voice, so trifling, indeed, that D'Artagnan did not perceive it any more than he had the momentary shade which, an instant before, had darkened the countenance of the worthy man. "Ah, may you be a true prophet," said D'Artagnan, laughing. "No, what I said," replied D'Artagnan, "is only that I may know whether I am delaying you." "Why that question, my dearest host?" asked D'Artagnan. "Do you intend to sit up for me?" "No, but since my arrest and robbery that was committed in my house, I am alarmed every time I hear the door open, particularly in the night. What the deuce can you expect? I am no swordsman. Well, don't be alarmed if I return at 1, 2, or 3 o'clock in the morning. Indeed, do not be alarmed if I do not come at all. This time Bonchenu became so pale that D'Artagnan could not help perceiving it, and asked him what was the matter. Nothing, replied Bonchenu, nothing. Since my misfortunes I have been subject to faintness, which seized me all at once, and I have just felt a cold shiver. Pay no attention to it. You have nothing to occupy yourself with but being happy. Then I have full occupation, for I am so. Not yet. Wait a minute. Wait just a little minute. This evening you said, well, this evening will come, thank God, and perhaps you look for it with as much impatience as I do. Perhaps this evening Madame Bonchenu will visit the conjugal domicile. Madame Bonchenu is not at liberty this evening, replied the husband, seriously. She is detained at the Louvre this evening by her duties. So much the worse for you, my dear host, so much the worse. When I am happy, I wish all the world to be so, but it appears that is not possible. The young man departed, laughing at the joke, which he thought he alone could comprehend. Amuse yourself well, replied Montchenu, in a sepulchral tone. But D'Artagnan was too far off to hear him, and if he had heard him, in the disposition of mind he then enjoyed, he certainly would not have remarked of it. He took his way toward the hotel of Monsieur de Tréville. His visit of the day before, it was to be remembered, had been very short and very expletive. He found Tréville in a joyful mood. He had thought the king and queen charming at the ball. It is true the cardinal had been particularly ill-tempered. He had retired at 1 o'clock under the pretense of being indisposed. As to their majesties, they did not return to the Louvre till 6 o'clock in the morning. Now, said Tréville, lowering his voice, and looking into every corner of the apartment to see if they were all alone, now let us talk about yourself, my young friend. For it is evident that your happy return has something to do with the joy of the king, the triumph of the queen, and the humiliation of his eminence. You must look out for yourself. What have I to fear, replied D'Artagnan, as long as I shall have the luck to enjoy the favor of their majesties? Everything, believe me, the cardinal is not a man to forget a mystification until he has settled account with the mystifier, and the mystifier appears to me to have an air of being a certain young Gascon of my acquaintance. Do you believe that the cardinal is as well posted as yourself, and knows that I have been to London? The devil! You have been to London? Was it from London you brought that beautiful diamond that glitters on your finger? Beware, my dear D'Artagnan. At present, from an enemy is not a good thing. No present from an enemy could ever be a good thing. And there are not Latin verses upon that subject. Stop. Yes, doubtless, replied D'Artagnan. Who had ever been able to cram the first rudiments of that language into his head, and who had by his ignorance driven his master to despair? Yes, doubtless there is one. There certainly is one, said Monsieur de Tréville, who had a tincture of literature, and Monsieur de Benasadre was quoting it to me the other day. Stop a minute. Ah, this is it. Timeo danos et dona ferentes, which means, beware of the enemy who makes you presents. This diamond does not come from an enemy, monsieur, replied D'Artagnan. It comes from the queen. From the queen? Oh, said Monsieur Tréville. Why, it is indeed a true royal jewel, which is worth 1,000 pistoles if it is worth a dinar. By whom did the queen send you this jewel? She gave it to me herself. Where? In the room adjoining the chamber in which she changed her toilet. How? Giving me her hand to kiss. You have kissed the queen's hand, said Monsieur de Treville, looking earnestly at D'Artagnan. Her Majesty did me the honor to grant me that favor, and that in the presence of witnesses. Imprudent, thrice imprudent. No, monsieur, be satisfied. Nobody saw her, replied D'Artagnan, and he related to Monsieur de Treville how the affair came to pass. Oh, the women, cried the old soldier. I know them by their romantic imagination. Everything that savors of mystery charms them. So you have seen the arm. That was all? You would meet the queen, and she would not know who you are? No, but thanks to the diamond, replied the young man, she would. Listen, said Monsieur de Treville. Shall I give you counsel, good counsel, the counsel of a friend? You will do me honor, monsieur, said D'Artagnan. Well then, off to the nearest goldsmith's, and sell that diamond for the highest price you can get from him, however much of a Jew or a businessman he may be. He will give you at least 800 pistoles. Pistoles have no name, young man, and that ring has a terrible one, which may betray him who wears it. Sell this ring, a ring which comes from my sovereign? Never, said D'Artagnan. Then at least turn the gem inside, you silly fellow, for everybody must be aware that a cadet from Gascony does not find such stones in his mother's jewel case. You think, then, I have something to dread? Asked D'Artagnan. I mean to say, young man, that he who sleeps over a mine, the match of which is already lighted, may consider himself in safety in comparison to you. The devil, said D'Artagnan, whom the positive tone of Monsieur de Treville began to disquiet. The devil, what must I do? Above all things, be always on your guard. The cardinal has a tenacious memory, a long arm. You may depend on it. He will repay you by some ill turn. But of what? How can I tell? Has he not all the tricks of a demon at his command? The least that can be expected is that you will be arrested. What? Will they dare to arrest a man in his Majesty's service? Pardieu. They did not scruple much in the case of Athos. At all events, young man, rely upon one who has been 30 years at court. Do not lull yourself in security, or you will be lost. But on the contrary, and it will be as I who say it, see enemies in all directions. If anyone seeks a quarrel with you, shun it, were it with a child of 10 years even. If you are attacked by day or by night, fight, but retreat without shame. If you cross a bridge, feel every plank of it with your foot, lest one should give way beneath you. If you pass before a house which is being built, look up, for fear a stone should fall upon your head. If you stay out late, be always followed by your lackey, and let your lackey be armed. If, by and by, you can be sure of your lackey, mistrust everybody, your friend, your brother, your mistress, and your mistress above all. D'Artagnan blushed. My mistress above all, repeated he mechanically. And why her rather than another? Because a mistress is one of the cardinal's favorite means. He has not one that is more expeditious. A woman will sell you for 10 pistoles. Witness Delilah. You are acquainted with the scriptures? D'Artagnan thought of the appointment of Madame Beauchesneau that had made with him for that very evening. But we are bound to say, to the credit of our hero, that the bad opinion entertained by Monsieur de Treville of women in general did not inspire him with the least suspicion of his pretty hostess. But apropos, resumed Monsieur de Treville, what has become of your 3 companions? I was about to ask you if you had heard any news of them. None, monsieur. Well, I left them on my road, Porthos at Chantilly, with a duel on his hands, Aramis at Crevecoeur, with a ball on his shoulder, and Athos at Amiens, detained by an accusation of coining. See there now, said Monsieur de Treville, and how the devil did you escape? By a miracle, monsieur, I must acknowledge, with a sword thrust in my breast, and by nailing the Comte de Wardes on the by-road of Calais like a butterfly on a tapestry. There again, de Wardes, one of the cardinal's men, a cousin of Roquefort. Stop, my friend, I have an idea. Speak, monsieur. In your place, I would do one thing. What? While his eminence was seeking for me in Paris, I would take without sound of drum or trumpet the road to Picardy, and would go and make some inquiries concerning my 3 companions. What the devil! They merit richly that piece of attention on your part. My advice is good, monsieur, and tomorrow I will set out. That is very good advice. Tomorrow. Why not this evening? This evening, monsieur, I am detained in Paris by an indispensable business. Ah, young man, some flirtation or another. Take care, I repeat to you, take care. It is woman who has ruined us, still ruins us, and will ruin us as long as the world stands. Take my advice and set out this evening. Impossible, monsieur. You have given your word, then? Yes, monsieur. Ah, that's quite another thing, but promise me, if you should not be killed tonight, that you will go tomorrow. I promise it. Do you need money? I have 50 pistoles. That, I think, is as much as I shall want. But your companions? I don't think they can be in need of any. We left Paris, each with 75 pistoles in his pocket. Shall I see you again before your departure? I think not, monsieur, unless something new should happen. Well, a pleasant journey. Thank you, monsieur. D'Artagnan left Monsieur de Treville, touched more than ever by his paternal solicitude for his Musketeers. He called successively at the abodes of Athos, Porthos, and Aramis. Neither of them had returned. Their lackeys likewise were absent, and nothing had been heard of either the one or the other. He would have inquired after them of their mistress, but he was neither acquainted with Porthos nor Aramis, and as to Athos, he had none. As he passed the Hotel des Gardes, he took a glance in the stables. 3 of the 4 horses had already arrived. Planchet, all astonishment, was busy grooming them, and had already finished 2. Ah, monsieur, said Planchet, on perceiving D'Artagnan, how glad I am to see you. Why so, Planchet? Asked the young man. Do you place confidence in your landlord, Monsieur Bonchenu? I? Not the least in the world. Oh, you do quite right, monsieur. Why this question? Because while you were talking with him, I watched you without listening to you, and monsieur, his countenance changed color 2 or 3 times. Bah! Preoccupied as monsieur was with the letter he had received, he did not observe that. But I, whom the strange fashion in which the letter came into the house had placed on my guard, I did not lose a movement of his features. And you found it? Traitorous, monsieur. Indeed. Still more, as soon as monsieur had left and disappeared round the corner of the street, Monsieur Bonchenu took his hat, shut his door, and set off at a quick pace in the opposite direction. It seems you are right, Planchet. All this appears to be a little mysterious, and to be assured that we must not pay him our rent until this matter shall be categorically explained to us. Monsieur jests, but monsieur will see. What would you have, Planchet? What must come is written. Monsieur does not then renounce his excursion for the evening? Quite the contrary, Planchet. The more ill will I have toward Monsieur Bonchenu, the more punctual I shall be in keeping the appointment made by the letter which makes you so uneasy. Then that is monsieur's determination. Undeniably, my friend. At 9 o'clock, then, be ready here at the hotel. I will come and take you. Planchet, seeing there was no longer any hope of making his master denounce or renounce his project, heaved a profound sigh and set to work to groom the third horse. As to D'Artagnan, being at the bottom of a prudent youth, instead of returning home, went and dined with the Gascon priest, who, at the time of the distress of the four friends, had given them a breakfast of chocolate. Chapter 24. The Pavilion. At 9 o'clock, D'Artagnan was at the Hôtel des Gardes. He found Planchet all ready. The fourth horse had arrived. Planchet was armed with his musketoon and a pistol. D'Artagnan had his sword and placed 2 pistols in his belt. Then both mounted and departed quietly. It was quite dark, and no one saw them go out. Planchet took place behind his master and kept at a distance of 10 paces from him. D'Artagnan crossed the quays, went out by the gate of La Conférence, and followed the road, much more beautiful than it is now, which leads to St. Cloud. As long as he was in the city, Planchet kept at a respectful distance. He had imposed upon himself. But as soon as the road began to become more lonely and dark, he drew softly nearer, so that when they entered the Bois de Boulogne, he found himself riding quite naturally side by side with his master. In fact, we must not dissemble that the oscillation of the tall trees and the reflections of the moon in the dark underwood gave him serious uneasiness. D'Artagnan could not help perceiving that something more than usual was passing in the mind of his lackey, and said, "Well, Monsieur Planchet, what is the matter with us now? Don't you think, monsieur, that the woods are like churches?" "How so, Planchet?" "Because we dare not speak aloud in one or the other." "But why did you not dare to speak aloud, Planchet? Because you are afraid?" "Afraid of being heard, yes, monsieur." "Afraid of being heard? Why, there is nothing improper in our conversation, my dear Planchet, and no one could find fault with it." "Ah, monsieur," replied Planchet, recurring to his besetting idea, "that Monsieur Bonchenou has something vicious in his eyebrows, something very unpleasant in the play of his lips. What the devil makes you think that of Bonchenou?" "Monsieur, we think of what we can, and not of what we will. Because you are a coward, Planchet? Monsieur, we must not confound prudence with cowardice. Prudence is a virtue, and you are very virtuous, are you not, Planchet? Monsieur, is not that the barrel of a musket which glitters yonder? Had we not better lower our heads?" "In truth," murmured D'Artagnan, to whom M. de Tréville's recommendation recurred, "in truth, this animal will end by making me afraid," and he puts his horse into a trot. Planchet followed the movements of his master as if he had been his shadow, and was soon trotting by his side. "Are we going to continue this pace all night?" asked Planchet. "No, you are not at your journey's end." "How, monsieur, are you?" "I am going a few steps farther." "And monsieur leaves me here alone?" "You are afraid, Planchet?" "No, I only beg leave to observe to monsieur that the night will be very cold, that chills bring on rheumatism, and that a lackey who has the rheumatism makes but a poor servant, particularly to a master as active as monsieur." "Well, if you are cold, Planchet, you can go into one of those cabarets that you see yonder, and be waiting there for me at the door by 6 o'clock in the morning. Monsieur, I have eaten and drunk respectfully, and the crown you gave me this morning was used, so that I have not a sou left in case I should be cold. Here's a half pistole tomorrow morning." D'Artagnan sprang from his horse, threw the bridle to Planchet, and departed at a quick pace, folding his cloak around him. "Good Lord, how cold I am!" cried Planchet as soon as he had lost sight of his master, and in such haste was he to warm himself that he went straight to a house set out with all the attributes of a suburban tavern, and knocked on the door. In the meantime, D'Artagnan, who had plunged into a bypath, continued his route and reached St. Cloud. But instead of following the main street, he turned behind the chateau, reached a sort of retired lane, and found himself soon in front of the pavilion named. It was situated in a very private spot. A high wall, at the angle of which was the pavilion, ran along one side of this lane, and on the other side a little garden, connected with a poor cottage, which was protected by a hedge from passer-bys. He gained the place appointed, and, as no signal had been given him by which to announce his presence, he waited. Not the least noise was to be heard. It might be imagined that he was 100 miles from the capital. D'Artagnan leaned against the hedge. After having cast a glance behind it, beyond that hedge, that garden, and that cottage, a dark mist enveloped with its folds that with that immensity where Paris slept, a vast void from which glittered a few luminous points, the funeral stars of that hell. But for D'Artagnan, all aspects were clothed happily. All ideas were smiled, all shades were diaphanous. The appointed hour was about to strike. In fact, at the end of a few minutes, the belfry of St. Cloud let fall slowly 10 strokes from its sonorous jaws. There was something melancholy in this brazen voice, pouring out its lamentations in the middle of the night. But each of those strokes, which made up the expected hour, vibrated harmoniously to the heart of the young man. His eyes were fixed upon the little pavilion situated at the angle of the wall, on which all the windows were closed with shutters, except for the one on the first story. Through this window shone a mild light which silvered the foliage of 2 or 3 linden trees, which formed a group outside the park. There could be no doubt that behind this little window, which threw forth such friendly beams, the pretty Madame Bonchenue expected him. Wrapped in this sweet idea, D'Artagnan waited half an hour without the least impatience, his eyes fixed upon the charming little abode, which he could perceive a part of the ceiling with its gilded moldings, attesting the elegance of the rest of the apartment. The belfry of St. Cloud sounded 10:30. This time, without knowing why, D'Artagnan felt a cold shiver run through his veins. Perhaps the cold began to affect him, and he took a perfectly physical sensation for moral impression. Then the idea seized him that he had read incorrectly, and that the appointment was for 11 o'clock. He drew near the window, and placing himself so that a ray of light should fall upon the letter as he held it, he drew it from his pocket and read it again. But he had not been mistaken. The appointment was for 10 o'clock. He went and resumed his post, beginning to be rather uneasy at the silence of this solitude. 11 o'clock sounded. D'Artagnan began now really to fear that something had happened to Madame Bonchenue. He clapped his hands 3 times, the ordinary signal of lovers, but nobody replied to him, not even an echo. He then thought, with a touch of vexation, that perhaps the young woman had fallen asleep while waiting for him. He approached the wall and tried to climb it, but the wall had been recently pointed, and D'Artagnan could not get a hold of it. At that moment he thought of the trees upon whose leaves the light still shone, and as one of them dropped or drooped over the road, he thought that from its branches he might get a glimpse of the interior of the pavilion. The tree was easy to climb. Besides, D'Artagnan was but 20 years old, and consequently had not yet forgotten his schoolboy habits. In an instant he was among the branches, and his keen eyes plunged through the transparent panes into the interior of the pavilion. It was a strange thing, and for one which made D'Artagnan tremble from the sole of his foot to the roots of his hair, to find that this soft light, this calm lamp, enlightened a scene of fearful disorder. One of the windows was broken. The door of the chamber had been beaten in and hung, split in two on its hinges. A table, which had been covered with an elegant supper, was overturned. The decanters broken in pieces, the fruits crushed, stewed on the floor. Everything in the apartment gave evidence of a violent, desperate struggle. D'Artagnan even fancied he could recognize amid this strange disorder fragments of garments and some bloody spots staining the cloth and the curtains. He hastened to descend into the street. With a frightful beating of his heart, he wished to see if he could find other traces of violence. The little soft light shone on the calmness of the night. D'Artagnan then perceived a thing that he had not before remarked, for nothing had led him to the examination that the ground, trampled here and hoof-marked there, presented confused traces of men and horses, besides the wheels of a carriage, which appeared to have come from Paris, had made a deep impression in the soft earth, which did not extend beyond the pavilion, but turned again toward Paris. At the length, D'Artagnan, in pursuing his researches, found near the wall a woman's torn glove. This glove, wherever it had touched the muddy ground, was of an irreproachable odor. It was one of those perfumed gloves that lovers like to snatch from a pretty hand. As D'Artagnan pursued his investigations, a more abundant and more icy sweat rolled in large drops from his forehead. His heart was oppressed by a horrible anguish. His respiration was broken and short, and yet he said, to reassure himself, that this pavilion perhaps had nothing in common with Madame Boncheneux, that the young woman had made an appointment with him before the pavilion and not in the pavilion, and that she might have been detained in Paris by her duties, or perhaps the jealousy of her husband. But these reasons were combated, destroyed, overthrown by the feeling of intimate pain which on certain occasions takes possession of our being and cries to us, so as to be understood unmistakably that some great misfortune is hanging over us. Then D'Artagnan became almost wild. He ran along the high road, took the path he had taken before, reaching the ferry, interrogated the boatman. About 7 o'clock in the evening, the boatman had taken over a young woman, wrapped in a black mantle, who had appeared to be very anxious not to be recognized, but entirely on account of her precautions. The boatman had paid more attention to her and discovered that she was young and pretty. There was then, as now, a crowd of young and pretty women who came to St. Cloud, and who had reasons for not being seen, and yet D'Artagnan did not for an instant doubt that it was Madame Boncheneux who the boatman had noticed. D'Artagnan took advantage of the lamp which burned in the cabin of the ferryman to read the billet of Madame Boncheneux once again, and satisfy himself that he had not been mistaken, that the appointment was at St. Cloud and not elsewhere, before the D'Estrees pavilion and not in another street. Everything conspired to prove to D'Artagnan that his presentiments had not been deceived, or had not deceived him, and that a great misfortune had indeed happened. He again ran back to the chateau. It appeared to him that something might have happened at the pavilion in his absence, and that fresh information awaited him. The lane was still deserted, and the same calm, soft light shone through the window. D'Artagnan then thought of the cottage, silent and obscure, which had no doubt seen all, and could tell its tale. The gate of the enclosure was shut, but he leaped over the hedge, and in spite of the barking of a chained-up dog, went up to the cabin. No one answered to his first knocking. A silence of death reigned in the cabin, as in the pavilion, but the cabin was his last resort. He knocked again. It soon appeared to him that he had heard a slight noise within, a timid noise which seemed to tremble lest it should be heard. Then D'Artagnan ceased knocking, and prayed with an accent to full anxiety and promises, terror and cajolery, that his voice was of a nature to reassure the most fearful. At length an old woman's shutter was open, or rather pushed ajar, but closed again as soon as the light from the miserable lamp, which burned in the corner, had shone upon the baldric. Sword, belt, pistol, pommels of D'Artagnan. Nevertheless, rapid as movement had been, D'Artagnan had time to get a glimpse of the head of the old woman. "In the name of heaven," cried he, "listen to me. I have been waiting for someone who has not come. I am dying with anxiety. Has anything particular happened in the neighborhood? Speak." The window was again opened, and the same face appeared, only now it was still more pale than before. D'Artagnan related his story simply, with the omission of the names. He told of how he had a rendezvous with a young woman before that pavilion, and how, not seeing her come, he had climbed the linden tree, and by the light of the lamp had seen the disorder of the chamber. The old man listened attentively, making a sign only that it was all so, and then, when D'Artagnan had ended, he shook his head with an air that announced nothing good. "What do you mean?" cried D'Artagnan. "In the name of heaven, explain yourself." "Oh, monsieur," said the old man, "ask me nothing, for if I dared to tell you what I have seen, certainly no good would befall me." "You have then seen something?" replied D'Artagnan. "In that case, in the name of heaven," continued he, throwing him a pistole, "tell me what you have seen, and I will pledge you the word of a gentleman that not one of your words shall escape my heart." The old man read so much truth and so much grief in the face of the young man that he made him a sign to listen, and repeated in a low voice. "It was scarcely 9 o'clock when I heard a noise in the street, and I was wondering what it could be, when on coming to my door I found that somebody was endeavoring to open it. As I am very poor and not afraid of being robbed, I went and opened the gate, and saw 3 men at a few paces from it. In the shadow was a carriage with 2 horses and some saddle horses. 3 horses evidently belonged to 3 men who were dressed as cavaliers. 'Ah, my worthy gentleman,' cried I, 'what do you mean?' 'You must have a ladder,' said he who appeared to be the leader of the party. 'Yes, monsieur, the one with which I gather my fruit.' 'Lend it to us, and go into your house again. There is a crown for you, and for all the annoyance we have caused you. Only remember this, if you speak a word of what you may see or what you may hear, for you will only look, and you will only listen. I am quite sure, however, you may be threatened. You are lost.' At these words, he threw me a crown, which I picked up, and he took the ladder. After shutting the gate behind them, I pretended to return to the house, but I immediately went back out the back door, and stealing along the shade of the hedge, I gained yonder clump of elder, from which I could hear and see everything. The 3 men brought the carriage up quietly, and took out of it a little man, stout, short, elderly, and commonly dressed in clothes of dark color, who ascended the ladder very carefully, looked suspiciously in the window of the pavilion, came down as quietly as he had gone, and whispered, 'It is she.' Immediately, he who had spoken to me approached the door of the pavilion, opened it, and with a key he had in his hand, closed the door and disappeared, while at the same time the other 2 men ascended the ladder. The little old man remained at the coach door. The coachman took care of his horses. The lackey held the horses. All at once great cries resounded in the pavilion, and a woman came to the door and opened it, as if to throw herself out of it. But as soon as she perceived the other 2 men, she fell backward, and they went into the chamber. Then I saw no more, but I heard the noise of breaking furniture. The woman screamed and cried for help, but her cries were soon stifled. Two of the men appeared to be bearing the woman in their arms and carried her into the carriage, into which the old man got in after her. The leader closed the window and came out in an instant after the door, and satisfied himself that the woman was in the carriage. His two companions were already on horseback. He sprang into his saddle. The lackey took his place by the coachman. The carriage went off at a quick pace, escorted by 3 horsemen, and all over. And that was it. It was all over. From that moment, I have neither seen nor heard anything. D'Artagnan, entirely overcome with this terrible story, remained motionless and mute, while all the demons of anger and jealousy were howling in his heart. But, my good gentlemen, resumed the old man, upon whom this mute despair certainly produced a greater effect than the cries and tears would have done, do not take on so. They did not kill her, and that is a comfort. Can you guess, said D'Artagnan, who was the man who herded her in this infernal expedition? I don't know him, but as you spoke to him, you must have seen him. Oh, it's a description you want. Exactly so. A tall, dark man with a black mustache, dark eyes, and the air of a gentleman. That's the man, cried D'Artagnan. Again, he, forever he. He is the demon, apparently. And the other? Which? The short one. Oh, he was not a gentleman. I answer for it. Besides, he did not wear a sword, and the others treated him with small consideration. Some lackey, murmured D'Artagnan. Poor woman, poor woman. What have they done with you? You have promised to be secret, my good monsieur, said the old man. And I renew my promise. Be easy. I am a gentleman. A gentleman has but his word, and I have given you mine. With a heavy heart, D'Artagnan again bent his way toward the ferry. Sometimes he hoped it would not be Madame Bonchenou, and that he should find her next day at the Louvre. Sometimes he feared she had an intrigue with another, who, in a jealous fit, had surprised her and carried her off. His mind was torn by doubt, grief, despair. Oh, if I had my 3 friends here, cried he, I should have at least some hopes of finding her, but who knows what has become of them? It was past midnight. The next thing was to find Planchet. D'Artagnan went successively into each of the cabarets in which there was a light, but could not find Planchet in any of them. At the 6th, he began to reflect that the search was rather dubious. D'Artagnan had appointed 6 o'clock in the morning for his lackey, and wherever he might be, he was right. Besides, it came into the young man's mind that by the remaining in the environs of the spot which this sad event had paused, he would, perhaps, have some light thrown upon the mysterious affair. At the 6th cabaret, then, as we said, D'Artagnan stopped, asked for a bottle of wine, and the best quality, and placing himself in the darkest corner of the room, determined thus to wait till daybreak. But by this time, again, his hopes were disappointed. And although he listened with all his ears, he heard nothing. Amid the oaths, coarse jokes, and abuse which passed between laborers, servants, and carters, who comprised the honorable society of which he formed a part, which could put him upon the least track of her who had been stolen from him, he was compelled then, after having swallowed the contents of the bottle, to pass the time as well as to evade suspicion, to fall into the easiest position in his corner, and to sleep. Whether well or ill, D'Artagnan, be it remembered, was only 20 years old, and at that age sleep has an imprescriptible rights, which it imperiously insists upon, even with the saddest hearts. Toward 6 o'clock, D'Artagnan awoke with an uncomfortable feeling, which generally accompanies the break of day or a bad night. He was not long in the making of his toilet. He examined himself to see if advantage had been taken of his sleep, and having found his diamond ring on his finger, and his purse in his pocket, and his pistols on his belt, he rose and paid for his bottle, and went out to try if he could have any better luck at searching for his lackey than he had the night before. The first thing he perceived, though, was the damp gray mist, and that was honest Planchet, who, with 2 horses in hand, awaited him at the door of a little blind cabaret, before which D'Artagnan had passed without even suspicion of its existence. And that, my friends, is all we're going to read tonight. I am feeling a little bit under the weather after being at Disneyland yesterday. I think I might have eaten something that spoiled my tummy. And so I'm not feeling 100%. So we're going to stop here, and we will pick this up again tomorrow night with chapter 25. This has been Indiana Holmes. Thank you all for joining me. Love to all, and good night.
Please hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notifications button. Thank you very much.